What is the best class for PvP in Season 2? And no, we don't mean 3v3 and solo shuffle only. We mean all of PvP. 2v2, 3v3, solo shuffle, and BG blitz. Right now, there are a ton of great classes for competitive PvP, but who comes out on top? Let's find out together. By the way, even if your favorite class doesn't make the top 5, it doesn't mean you're completely screwed. The nice thing about WoW these days is that there is at least one bracket which your class can probably do well in. Hey, get out of here. Anyway, if you're looking to play something new this season, we've updated all of our class courses for Season 2. You'll save hundreds of hours and avoid countless headaches by following our step-by-step guides designed to gain rating fast. We take concepts like positioning and break them down into bite-sized pieces, kind of like quests, but instead of experience, you gain rating. And if you're a skill cap member, we've taken all the anxiety out of gearing thanks to our add-on that now shows BIS lists directly in-game, including gear, enchants, and gems, updating automatically each week. Skill cap members also get the latest talent builds for every form of content, evolving every week as the meta changes, which means you're never out of the loop. As always, we continue to offer a rank up guarantee where we promise you can gain at least 400 rating while using our service. So what are you waiting for? Visit skillcap.com today using the exclusive discount link below. For now, back to the video. Coming in at number 5 is Evoker, a class that many people might be sleeping on in some brackets, no pun intended. If you've watched our recent tier lists, you already know that Preservation and Dev Evoker are some of the best specs in solo shuffle, despite their lower numbers of representation. But don't let the data fool you. Ever since the change to Sleepwalk, Evokers have truly leveled up, becoming one of the best classes in every PvP bracket. While Preservation is most known for its role in supporting hyper-aggressive 3v3 comps, it turns out having a bunch of damage as a healer makes it incredibly strong in 2v2 as well. And now since Mistweaver monks can no longer port with the flag on BG blitz maps, Preservation Evokers are one of the best flag carriers in the bracket, all while having some of the highest potential healing output in the entire game. Devastation has definitely been flying under the radar too. While it doesn't have the best comp selection in 3v3, the spec has managed to climb to the highest ratings in solo shuffle as the #1 melee bully. Now obviously Augmentation hasn't seen spectacular results lately, but as a whole, Evoker is a class designed to do well in every form of PvP. Next up at number 4 on our list is Druid, the classic jack of all trades. Right now, there's a place for all 3 of the main Druid specs in PvP. It's no secret that Feral is one of the best melee DPS in Arena, and some players have argued that it is even #1. Feral conveniently slots in with virtually any caster in 3v3 and solo shuffle, having the control and lockdown needed to enable those overpowered wizards. And right now, 2v2 might actually be the bracket where Ferals are most overpowered. After the Omega buffs to Discipline Priest, Feral Disc is back on the menu as one of the most dominant comps in the bracket. Seriously, this comp is an absolute powerhouse, and if you play 2v2 this season, you're bound to play Feral Disc almost every other game. No pun intended, but balanced druids are a little bit more balanced, at least in Arena. But even though there are a few other casters taking the spotlight in the 3v3 and solo shuffle metas, Boomkins have still held their ground, being a high-tier threat, especially when paired with high-tier control specs like rogues and demon hunters. BG Blitz is where Boomkins truly shine, being a staple of competitive battlegrounds for over a decade. Right now, Balanced Druid is one of the most popular specs at the highest ratings of BGB, and honestly, this isn't surprising. Its entire toolkit was handcrafted to dominate the bracket by having insane AoE damage combined with punchy single-target burst, tons of control, and of course, stealth. The ability to seamlessly transition from teamfights to objectives makes Boomies an MVP in BG Blitz. Now, we know there have been some doubts about Resto Druid so far this season, but we think the spec has tons of potential in every single bracket. While Resto has a much steeper learning curve compared to other healers, it also has a super high skill ceiling. Cyclone is arguably the most powerful CC tool in the game, and when put in the hands of a healer, you have a ton of game-winning potential. As always, the 2v2 bracket will be where Resto Druids shine the most. 11.1 introduced a ton of new damage talents, giving them insane DPS potential, especially when playing Convoke. Even though priests are currently absorbing all of the attention, Resto Druids are a perfect match for any high-tier melee and even some wizards. Now, before we reveal our top 3, we want to give some honorable mentions to a few classes who barely missed the top 5. Shaman was a possible contender, but has seen a bit of inconsistency across all 3 specs. For a while, Resto was considered to be one of the best healers in Arena, but has fallen off slightly. But Elemental seems to be doing noticeably better after its recent buffs. Meanwhile, Enhancement Shamans have one of the craziest one-shots in the entire game. Unfortunately, Shaman just falls a bit short outside of 3v3 and solo shuffle. Ellie and Enhancement are easily some of the worst specs in 2v2. You're always going to be at a massive disadvantage as a DPS if you don't have an MS effect in 2s. Shaman as a whole just isn't too exceptionally good in BG Blitz. Don't get us wrong, it definitely is not terrible, but there are much better options. Mage and Warlock were also contenders for the top 5, but just narrowly lacked the depth to be considered good in all of PvP. Wizards are obviously really good right now in 3v3 and solo shuffle, but 2v2 isn't a great bracket these days given the army of feral druids, hunters, and windwalker monks who are ready to chop you down in 0.1 seconds. We need to be honest, sorting our top 3 was really tough, and you could make an argument for any one of these classes to be 1, 2, or 3. With that in mind, coming in at the number 3 slot is Hunter. This is a class that seems to stand the test of time every single expansion. It definitely helps that Beast Mastery is always one of the most popular specs in the game, which means it will be consistently viable. BM is also super beginner friendly and just crushes it in every arena bracket. It's funny because BM hunters never really stand out in solo shuffle. They're good without most players noticing. We're all too distracted getting one-shot by Mistweaver monks that we don't notice the BM hunters secretly going 6-0 in the background. Beast Mastery also has some of the best tier set bonuses this season, which actually make the spec more beginner friendly, especially in 2v2, which is the bracket that BM hunters seem to dominate every single expansion. Marksmanship is done well in every arena bracket this season too, but BG Blitz is where it truly stands out. Marks Hunters are a classic noob slayer in any battleground thanks to having some of the best burst in the game, which now includes aimed shots that hit for 5 million damage and rapid fires that rain out AoE damage like a nuclear weapon. Of course, big crits aren't their only selling point, as hunters make great objective players too. Obviously, survival is sort of the elephant in the room. It hasn't done exceptionally well so far this season after a nerf to one of its gimmicky one-shots, but we can see stocks rise in the near future thanks to their 4 set, which might give them crazy mongoose bite damage. Big Mechs even managed to snag the number 1 shuffle spot on EU with just the 2 set alone. Now, coming in at number 2 is Priest, a class that has done insanely well in all forms of PvP this season. Now obviously, Disc Priest was coasting along as the number 1 healer for multiple weeks, but now Holy seems to have taken the lead, at least in 3v3. The AWC is right around the corner, and if we had to guess, Holy will be one of the most popular healers. When it comes to 2v2, both Disc Priest and Holy are currently in a league of their own, and are able to do ridiculous damage as both specs. If you've wondered why double DPS has been dead for a few expansions now, it's because priests are basically the WoW version of the Undertaker. Seriously, put a priest with a feral druid, hunter, rogue, windwalker, monk, or basically any other S-tier melee, and you're guaranteed to crush any poor soul who is just trying to cap conquest with their friend. Disc Priests are also one of the best healers in Battleground Blitz, having the right combination of healing output and team utility. Holy is definitely in a much better spot now compared to the past, and can even do an absurd amount of damage, especially in 2v2. Seriously, some games Zenlin will straight up do more damage than an actual DPS. When it comes to Shadow Priest, this is a spec that has caught us by surprise. You would think that in a meta dominated by a bunch of brawler melee that Shadow might be another victim spec, but it somehow managed to consistently be one of the most represented casters at the highest ratings. While Shadow Priest is more of an arena specialist than anything else, it's kind of the most balanced high-tier spec in the game. Sure, it has its weaknesses, like needing to hardcast 24/7, but it's also one of the tankiest specs in all of PvP, all while having incredibly good utility. Seriously, this might be one of the best seasons ever to be a priest. No matter what spec you play, there's a bracket you will be really good at. Now, we know that 90% of you probably knew this was coming, but coming in at number 1 is Rogue. But why are they still so good? Even though Rogues lost some major PvP talents in the 11.1 patch, the meta has turned out to be quite favorable for Rogues. For one, their BFF healer priests have been really good so far. That's not to say Holy Paladins were holding Rogues back last season, but Rogue definitely does best when Priest is good and Paladin isn't everywhere on the ladder. Priests and Rogues just have that classic synergy that is hard to replicate for any other melee. And for the second season in a row this expansion, both Mages and Warlocks are really good, which means Rogues have access to the absolute best comps in 3v3. And on the other hand, some classes have gotten much better this season and just happen to be Rogue food in Arena. Right now, all 3 specs are very strong in every single bracket, including BG Blitz, of course. Assassination continues to be the most accessible rogue spec, especially after its rework that made Garrett and Rupture AoE. On its surface, Assassination might seem maintenance heavy, needing to manage dots and so on, but it's kind of the most brain AFK version of Rogue I've personally ever played. Asa is probably the best rogue spec right now in solo shuffle for most players. Outlaw, on the other hand, is a bit more tricky, and although it's not exceptionally strong in solo shuffle for the general population, it's somehow managed to weasel its way into the number 1 rogue spec in competitive 3v3 for the 10th season in a row. Although it's lost some of its utility this season, Outlaw is still the tankiest rogue spec, and arguably the most annoying to play against given the fact that it has infinite mobility. Sub has also seen a bit of a rework so far this season, losing out on some of its Omega one-shot damage in favor of better sustained DPS overall. This has managed to make it even better in Arena, as it's not really relying on having every cooldown up in order to win games. While Sub is probably the hardest spec to do exceptionally well with in Solo Shuffle, it's definitely a bit more forgiving compared to the past. And as always, it would be hard to argue that Rogue isn't the best class for BG Blitz. Actually, we lied. It wouldn't be hard, it would be impossible. While all three Rogue specs are more than viable in BGs, Sub is probably the most dynamic since it has insanely good objective play, even after the loss of Shadowy Duel. So yeah, while it probably wasn't a surprise to anyone watching, Rogues are just incredibly strong in all forms of PvP right now, and are easily the #1 overall class. And remember, if you are a skill cap member, you can now see Bislists directly in-game as a part of the #1 PvP UI. We've also got brand new courses for Season 2, including how to counter every class in the game. Positioning, we make it easy. And of course, our class guides teach you how to master your spec. Skill capped is #1 for a reason. Everything we offer is backed up by a rating gain guarantee. Yes, we actually promise you will gain rating while using our service. So if you want to get started, be sure to visit the exclusive discount link below. For now, we want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.